Festive season, usually lots of partying, and what goes with partying? Drinking. It may be a difficult time for those who are recovering from any kind of alcohol addiction and those who actually are wanting to stay away from alcohol. Well, Gareth Carter from Changes Addiction Rehab here in Johannesburg joining us this morning. Some tips on how to stay sober this holiday season. Hello, Gareth. Good to have you on the show. And this must be very triggering. Let's start with those who are dealing with an addiction in this case, a certified addiction with alcohol. This must be a very difficult time of year.
Yeah, the relapse rates certainly do rise. The suicide rates rise over this year. It's an incredibly stressful time of year, so it stands to reason that people in recovery that struggle more would have a higher rate of relapse.
What is the best way to handle something like this? What do you do as a family? Do you not invite that person? Do you not invite that friend around? Do you invite them around and then tell everybody else not to drink around them? Because now you have this social dynamic, don't you, which we've got to deal with.
Well, the critical thing about quality addictions care is that it has to be comprehensive. So the critical thing that we're looking for in primary care addiction treatment is what's called the corrective emotional experience. It's almost like a religious conversion, because once we've achieved that, Gareth, then that internal shift has taken place. That person will stay sober regardless of whether they're invited or not, there's drinks or not, regardless of whether they're in Miami or Moscow. They have the internal ability, regardless of external circumstances, to stay clean and sober.
And so now when we talk about someone who is potentially looking to maybe cut back, let me ask, maybe I'm phrasing this bad, let me ask this. Someone who thinks they may be drinking a bit too much in general and they're choosing now, because we're getting to the end of the year, New Year's resolutions, I want to do things differently next year, for example, is starting to think about cutting back. Is this a good time to do it, considering how tempting it's going to be to just fall back into old habits? How do you begin to do that?
Well, if you have an alcohol problem, there is no good or bad time to stop. The only time is right now. Ask for help right now, because the sooner you get help, the better the chances of the likelihood of a positive outcome from treatments. If you wait for too long, the problem becomes much more complex and entrenched and severe, and it's a lot more difficult to make that transition to recovery.
Can we talk about addiction at this point as well, and a problem with substance abuse, in this case alcohol, because we are talking about alcohol, Gareth. When does somebody know that they have a problem? What are the trigger signs? Are we talking about someone who enjoys a glass of wine or two in the evening, even during the week after a stressful day? Is that considered a problem, or when does it start becoming an issue? What are the telltale signs?
One of the diagnostic criteria for being determined a person with a substance use or an alcohol use disorder is the loss of control. So responsible drinking isn't just about the amount you drink, it's about not letting it have a detrimental effect on your life and those around you, your work, your hobbies, your studies, your social life. So if your drinking is having a negative or a detrimental effect on any part of your life, and you have the ability to reduce your drinking, thereby reducing the problem, that's alcohol abuse. And if you have the ability to stop, that's great. If you find that there's loss of control, so the negative consequences are there, and despite your awareness of them, you can't stop drinking to reduce the problems, then that loss of control is one of the key things that we use to determine if a person has a severe drinking problem or not.
And when it comes to someone, off the back of what you just said, maybe it's a family member, a loved one, maybe it's someone themselves, I've just heard you give that description, Gareth. Is it not also still true that unless an addict wants the help, they're never actually going to make the change that they need to? You can't force this on someone. How do you try and have that conversation with a loved one or a friend that you think may have a problem, but they're not willing to admit it? They think it's fine to have a bottle of wine, twice a day, Monday to Friday.
Gareth, I'm so glad you asked it. It's such a critical point. This is the biggest myth and misconception about addiction and its effective treatment, is that the patient has to somehow hit this rock bottom, had a moment of clarity, be entirely willing to enter treatment for rehab to work. Research has proven again and again over the last 20 years that that is untrue. Addiction is a brain disease. So once I've become addicted, my brain has changed in structure and in function. And if you're expecting me to suddenly see the light and say, oh, Gareth, God, you're so right, I have a problem, I need some help, it doesn't happen. So pre-admission levels of motivation have nothing to do with the outcome of treatment. We work with families all the time in ways to raise that person's rock bottom and leverage them into treatment to keep them in treatment until they're well.
And I want to ask about interventions here because, and this is not to cast any sort of comical view on it, but you often see these interventions and interventions on TV shows, and they seem quite comical. What's the best way to go about this? Do you gather the whole family together like you would see in a TV show, and as the person walks to the front door, there's this group of people saying, you know, Gareth, sit down, we think you've got a problem? Because I can't imagine that might go down very well because you could feel very attacked. And accused as well. What's the best way to do something like that if you feel you need to as a family?
Well, I'm the only qualified interventionist on the continent. I've done close to 200 of them, and that's exactly how it works. We gather a key group of stakeholders, and we find the right sort of leverage, and we work with the family to find ways that they can get the patient in. And it's pretty much the same as you see on the TV. I haven't watched too many of those shows, but I've caught little snippets, but that's pretty much how it works.
And let me ask this then as well, just as we start closing off for the morning as well. What happens if someone, even in a situation, as you said, in an intervention, doesn't want to admit that they're hell-bent, they don't have a problem, everybody else is the issue? I mean, it's this kind of alcohol aggression that I'm sure you probably come across quite often, Gareth. What happens if somebody just doesn't want the help? What do the friends and family do? I mean, you can't force someone into rehab, can you?
Yes, we do it all the time. Essentially, an intervention is like one of those old wooden ladders that have quite broad steps at the bottom, and then the higher you go, the more narrow they get. So we would start with a loving consequence at the bottom saying, look, we love and adore you, we want the best for you, we'd love you to go for treatment, we've packed a bag, and everybody reads the letter describing the negative impact that the patient's drinking has had on their life, and we slowly work up. And that last rung, which is smack bang under their neck, is either getting a Form 4, which is an involuntary committal for 72 hours to a locked-up psychiatric unit, which buys us time to get a court date and a court appearance when we'll get a court order. In most cases, that's not necessary, but we really find ways to leverage, cajole, pressure, force the person into treatment. If you're waiting for them to have a moment of clarity, it doesn't happen.
Sadly, and I'm afraid I'm going to just end off with getting your information as well, Gareth, because I feel there could be quite a lot of people watching this who obviously don't want to get to that point, as you said, where it's underneath your neck, but maybe the lower rung of that wooden box, the loving elements of this. Where does someone get hold of you? I wouldn't give out your cell phone number if I was you, but where can we send people who feel they may have a problem, they know someone who has a problem, or they might need, like you were saying, an intervention? Where do we go?
Gareth, our national helpline is 081 444 7000, 081 444 7000, or they can go to changesrehab.co.za.
Very, very helpful, and I'm hoping if anyone is watching, they feel they just need some advice, some guidance, or maybe, hopefully not, but maybe somebody watching feels that a loved one or a friend needs an intervention, Gareth, I think they might be getting hold of you. Gareth Carter from Changes Addiction Rehab. I'll repeat the number for you. It's nice and easy. It's 081 444 7000. Gareth, that was right, hey? 081 444 7000. There, I'm getting a nod. That's the number you can get hold of if you feel that you're going down the slippery slope, if you know someone who may need some help. Gareth Carter is the one to go to. Gareth, I appreciate your time. Thank you.